Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is Tipping Point Live, where we meet weekly and chat with industry and thought leaders to have a chat and have a good time along the way, and hopefully learn something. And I'm delighted today to welcome Gousigan Thiyagarajan, who is the Regional Director of Delivery at Fulcrum Digital. Welcome, Gousi.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me here.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Busy day, but hanging on as usual.
So I imagine, and we can get right into it. I mean, we've known each other for about 6 months now, 8 months actually. We first met. I had the pleasure and honor of being invited to India for the annual kickoff for Fulcrum Digital, which is called Tandem, and you were kind enough to give me some pointers along the way. So delivery, regional delivery manager, director. I'm sorry. How have you been with the organization?
So it's close to 18 years now. I started in 2005 as a senior software engineer at Fulcrum in Pune and moved back to US and started as a consultant here and played multiple roles in terms of technical lead and became an SME. And then from there, I managed projects, right? And then now here I'm doing the regional director role at Fulcrum.
So you sort of gloss over 18 years, and this is a story that I keep hearing, which is a really encouraging one. 18 years, especially in the digital space, is many lifetimes for most people.
Mhm.
I think that being that long, especially with a digital company, a technology company, is relatively unheard of in this day and age. And I imagine a tremendous amount of technology has come and then gone within that period. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your origin story, what it looked like in this space when you started?
Yep, I think when we started, I think that's when the IT was trending towards, right? It's you do not have much of the tools like how we have now, right? But so it's like most of the things are like you develop from the scratch, like with the limited tools and technology that you have, right? Versus now where you leverage lots of platforms and tools, right, to deliver what we need for our customers, right?
Yeah, and I neglected to say we are out live across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. For folks out there in the audience, by all means, please, if you have any questions or comments along the way, Gousi is a wealth of knowledge and resources. So by all means, jump in. You already have a thumbs up from someone, so saying hello to you. Um, I only entered this space about 8 years ago, and at that time, there was already a pretty big drive toward commoditized platforms across industry, in particular e-commerce. And I harken back. You've been in this industry, 3 times as long as I have. What were you guys using back then? What were you programming in, and what did the projects look like?
Yeah, I started with a tool called Dexterity. So in the healthcare industry, we were building products in 2002, right? And then I moved back to Fulcrum and got into the .NET technologies, right? That's when I think we get into the .NET technology side of it, right? On Microsoft, SQL Server, and everything. That's how I started my career at Fulcrum, right? And then I've been more or less into the Microsoft, then slowly moved into OpenStack and everything. So
And how long into your tenure with Fulcrum? When did you say you were in the U.S.? You went back and helped really open and grow the global delivery center in Pune. How long were you back in India for?
I was in India for a year only, and then I was majority of time my time was here. So yeah.
And how big was the company when you joined, or how big was the delivery center?
I think it was pretty small. I think probably we had close to 20 or 25 in India. So
Okay. And when you first joined, what role? Remind me, what role did you have?
I was software engineer. So yeah.
Has that been helpful as you've grown in the role and grown your role in the company, going from software engineer and understanding the zeros and ones and nuts and bolts to managing a whole regional team with the
Yeah,
complex.
definitely. It's all about delivery, right? So you need to know exactly what does it take to deliver a project, right? So the underlying engine is all purely developers, right? It's not about the managers or the delivery managers or whatever it is, right? So the core engine is all the developers and QAs who's predominantly doing the role. So it's very good to know, be in that role to in that position. So to understand the pain and what it takes for developers to get it delivered, right? So it's always important to be coming from that side of it and to this one. So
Is that something that's changed over the past couple decades? And I'm curious on the, and it's been a few years since I've been client facing. Um, when it comes to expectations of development, of project management, of delivery, of all the moving parts, and I would like to get into what delivery means and all the moving parts involved, but have, I guess the question is, have clients and have brand side folks become more educated and understanding of what it takes? There's always the debate, the triangle of fast, good, cheap, and you can't have all three.
Mhm.
How has that evolved since you entered this space?
Yeah, I think when we started, right? So versus now, if you look at it, so the fundamental expectations from customers doesn't change, right? They always at the any given point want the best of the breed solution, which is cost effective and also quick to market, right? So that's the two things that always the customer expects. But like right now, like if you have lots of tools and platforms, technologies evolved, right? Where delivering to the market is much faster than the old times where you have to do everything on your own, right? Build it, like lots less framework was available on the market, like versus now, right? So that's the only change I would say, where the expectation of quick to market is more now because there are platforms and tools available, right? So
Are you seeing, when you say market demand and let's say supply of human resources, talent, y- you know, as we grow, as the world grows, there's more focus on technology, education, and background. Have you seen a growth in sort of the, for lack of a better term, sort of the labor pool of that's out there for development? And does that, how is that distributed from what you've seen?
no, I still see you have like there is no lack in talent pool, right? You have a lot, right? So as technology grows, people switch gears, try to learn, right? There are plenty of available to jump in as the technology trends kept changing, right? So in past also, like when we started, it's the same thing, right? So that time also .NET and all these things, C Sharp, all evolving. That's when it was evolving, right? Close to 2 to 3 years at time. That's plenty people. There is at the time also people started jumping and learning. We were able to find lots of people who's needed for doing the job. So
So okay, so that's helpful. And it certainly has become probably a more competitive market as well, as digital continues to grow
yeah,
across industries.
that's
Um,
right.
so can we dig into delivery a little bit? I think we generally oversimplify um, globally and certainly as an industry of what delivery means. And I think at a high level, it's all right. So you have a project you work with the commercial team, a sales team, and then it just gets developed and delivered. Can you talk a little bit about, all the moving parts within delivery?
Yep, sure. I think when we start, right, once we work with sales team to understand what the client wants, right, the delivery unit jumps in with all the solution architect technologies available in their pool, right? They get aligned with customer, understand what they want, right? How what tools and technologies can come in picture, right, to deliver the best solutions for them, right? Right from there, the delivery starts involved, right? And then once we come and understand what's needed and come up with the right solution, then we uh, get into it and kickstart a project, right? Which starts with making sure that we have effective solution which meets the standard, bug-free, quality, everything is all involved, right? So
How I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious when and where, delivery wants to and is able to get involved in the sales process. Um, there's always that sort of tension and battle. You see these sort of funny cartoons of, you know,
mhm,
what the client wants, what sales promises, what can be delivered, what ends up being delivered. So how early in that process, are you looking to get involved as a delivery team to ensure that, upfront, top of the funnel, you talk about during the sales process, you talk about this with the
mhm.
prospect, right? This is what are your hopes and dreams? What's your 1, 3, 5 year plan? But then at some point you need to, you know, formulate a written document that governs that engagement and says, well, we talked about all these things. This is what, collectively we think should be the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But
Mhm.
there's always a little bit of it, on the client side saying, oh, well, I thought this was part of this and I thought this meant this. Um, so what does that look like when you're upfront sort of helping develop those, proposals and, making sure that there's alignment between sales and delivery and that, everyone's rowing in the same direction?
Yeah, definitely. So, in my opinion, deliveries get involved from the beginning itself, right? Once the initial inception call with sales and client, after that, once sales know exactly what client wants, right from after that, like delivery also go hand in hand with sales, helping them, right? Do's and don'ts, what is feasible, not feasible, why it's not feasible, how, what else we can do, right? So that's going to help sales to go ahead and know exactly what it is, and so that we all know the magnitude of work that you're going to do, right? So I would recommend, and I prefer always to be involved right from the beginning,
Mhm.
to see what's happening and where we can add value to the sales to ensure that they have all the things that's needed from the technology side of it, right? Helping them to make a better deal out of it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that we live and work in an industry where historically, that's a pretty big challenge. That this in the services space, in the tech space, that's always going to be something that we're collectively striving toward. Um, Delivery and account management, client success are areas where there's tremendous pressure, right? Once
yes.
the project moves into initiation, kickoff,
Mhm.
um, the heat's on, right? This is how it frequently, post kickoff, the first question is, okay, when can we, we're all excited about this, everyone's endorphins are running. We've just come to an agreement on this exciting new project we kick off. And
Mhm.
the first question is, well, when can we launch, right? So you're already getting
Yeah, that's true.
questions out of the gate of when this thing can be live. How do you navigate that and help ensure, sort of morale stays high? And, I think the development side of things are they carry the heaviest burden in this process because
Mhm.
it all comes down to that. And there's often, unsung heroes and forgotten people and folks. It's sort of under the hood. People don't see what's going on. So, what does the day to day look like to ensure that that team is continuing to be, optimistic, enthusiastic, and um,
Yeah. So
feeling
one thing,
that
what
pressure?
yeah, what I typically do is, right. So always any project these days has an end goal when you start itself, right? The launch date or launch month is fixed, and you work backwards, right? So, and what how I encourage team to do is like split your deliverables into different parts, right? What's most valuable first to begin with, deliver it as a tangible outcome, right? That's more important, right? Sometimes what happens is you always go through unforeseen challenges during delivery, right? In terms of technology tools that you may not predict at the beginning, right? So when you make a tangible deliverables, what happens is you can identify independent parts, moving parts, which customer can start looking at it, using it, give critic feedbacks, right? Which could be early indication of what how things are going, right? And then from there we can improve on it. And the another thing I would typically do is, right, to make sure that like you keep your updates very transparent with client and all the stakeholders in the project, right? Be it with challenges, be it things going fine, so that what happens is uh, there is no surprises, right? Because everybody knows what's going on, what's a typical project takes, right? These
Yeah.
days, right? It's always like transparency and trust creation is very important in any project, right? So that's very important. It doesn't matter whether you hit the timeline because this, or whether you miss the timeline. Always there is a reason, right? So finishing a project ahead of time has a certain reason behind it, how it launched earlier, right? Even if you missed, you have a valid, genuine reason that will be respected only if you are having the transparency to communicate, right, with the client and establish a trust, right?
Yeah,
That's one.
that's a really great point. There's always going to be unknowns going into a project. This is, the old mechanic getting. It sounds like this is the problem, but once you get quote under the hood, you see
Yes.
what's really there, and a lot of that comes certainly with data. With data migration and data items, and it's an easy trap to fall into. Right? Is what will is to postpone and put off the uncomfortable conversation with the client, in the hopes that you will close that gap by
Yeah,
the
that's right.
time it comes to a head. And more often than not, that's not possible, right? So you end up in this space where your back's against the wall, the client has expectations that they are looking to deliver to their team, and it blows up into, what it becomes a very uncomfortable, tenuous situation at best. So I think that transparency piece is, as you said, everyone's on the same team, and you work on it together. And without that level of transparency, identifying risk items up front and being, transparent along the way, that's the relationship that you're building with the client. And yeah, I appreciate that. I think there's a question out there from the audience, which I think is a good piggyback on what we were just discussing. Come Kartharaj, dear Gousi, how do you balance the satisfying the client need to burning out a resource, especially the good ones? But it's a great question. We'll leave it up there. How do you keep the team motivated
Yeah,
and work-life balance?
yeah, that's very important, right? So that's a very good question, Karthi. So I know. So just Karthi, good to see you. Good to see the message from you, right? So we have worked in the past, right? So that's a good thing here. So yeah, so typically what I majorly follow, and I also request the team to do is, right, you have a recommend, you have expectations set with the client that we'll deliver it, right? So and also at the same time we have a resource on our side who are all doing good and everything, and they may have to do some workload, right, or they may have to stretch themselves, right? So one of the main thing that like I try to do is have some additional team members along with you to balance the work, right? Even though if sometimes you need two people work to be done, you cannot keep it two people, right? Then they'll be more stressed. So I try to have a balance of additional resource in the team, right, so that the work can be sliced, so that anticipate, right, the risk, anticipate the burnout that you could come, and then trying to give the work life balance for them. So that's the strategy that I've been adopting recently. So that's working out for them, so that they don't need to put long hours, right, sacrificing the personal life and stressing out here. So
And that's another really good point. There will always be work to do, right? That never stops. And I remember, in a prior life, I worked with some folks on the delivery side, on the project management side, um, who explained to me the value of breaking up tasks and only putting those tasks. This was their particular preference with some of the dev team, was while you could theoretically break up the whole project up front into the sprints and throw them all into Jira or whatever project management tool you're using, that can become overwhelming, right? And all of a sudden you're a developer looking at your board and you feel like you'll never get to the end of it. So she would actually break them up and only give, things that could be cleared off the board in the sprint, right? So you're not thinking about, feeling like the task is overwhelming and how do we even get there? You do it in small bites. I'm curious, how do you see, with sprint planning and execution, what's I know this is a broad question, but what do you
No, I get your question. So there are two aspects to it, right? One is we always need to keep the expectation in check, right? Be it be a client, be it be the expectation we set with the developer, right? It also has to be kept in check with all times, right? So that you do not overcommit, right? You know the strength of your team, you know what you can deliver, right? So if there is a request that's coming that like which needs burn rate from your team than what is expected, right? I always try to go back to the customer, explain what it is, and then try to find more velocity in to the team so that like they can go ahead and deliver it faster, right? At the same time, to your question about how do you uh, keep the number of stories or things that is coming in the backlog in check, right? So always backlog is going to be always have a handful of items, right? That your team can deliver or not deliver. It's all about sprints, right? Either you run multiple sprints at the time or you can run one sprint at a time depending upon your velocity that you have, right? So always at the same time, whatever the active sprint, you keep the sprint active, right? So people will always know what is active sprint on the board. Only things that's going to have an extra is the item that is unfinished, right, in the previous sprints, right? So that way you can balance things out. So it's every project manager, every scrum master has their own style of how they manage it, right? Only thing is, it's again, you need to communicate how things are being run. Everybody, as long as everybody's aware of how you're running the show, I think that should not be a concern for anybody.
Yeah, thanks for that. Quick reminder, we are here with Gousi, or Gousi, I should say. I've learned to pronounce that more correctly. Gousi, with Fulcrum Digital. We're here on Tipping Point Live. By all means, folks out there, questions, comments, or otherwise, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we will get to them along the way. So we talked a little bit about your background. We've talked about what delivery looks like. We talked about how to manage and maintain team morale and making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction. You add in the complexity of sort of post-COVID hybrid workforce, distributed workforce. It where you are located globally is a much smaller factor than it used to be in the digital age. How do you manage that? You got teams across four continents, if not 5 continents. You've got time zone challenges. You've got language challenges. You've got how does that all work together?
Yeah, definitely. It was challenging, right? I'd not say it was a breeze, right? So definitely it was a challenge, right? But thanks to Teams, so Microsoft has made lots of our lives easier, right? Where everybody able to jump on to the Teams, right, on a video call, right? Yeah, it was a challenge for initial few months, right? Once because more than like people getting on Teams, it was challenging. There are some people who may not have that infrastructure and environment to come on Teams and video call, right? So because understanding body language of every personnel is very important in terms of a team, right? To know exactly what they are thinking, right? So accordingly, because when you're in person, you know the team, you can understand the people by seeing them. They have some concerns, they're not coming up, opening up, you can ask them, right? But like in off screen without seeing them, it's very tough to understand what the individual is thinking, right? So but the initial time it was challenging, and once everybody is able to get on hop on the video call conferencing, and it made life a lot easier. So
Do you think the market sort of settled down in terms of folks being able, being comfortable with, on both sides of the fence, right? This is on the leadership management, employment side, as well as the employee team side, comfortable with this model?
I'm not sure about that, but personally, I can comment from my perspective is I still believe hybrid would be the best option from my perspective, because you need to have the personal in face-to-face interaction, because nothing can beat that, right? So even respective of what kind of VM, like these days, people are moving towards using this extended reality, create a virtual environment where you can be virtual office, you can feel that you're all co-located in the same room, right? So but still, like, you don't have that in-person connect, right? So I always like believe to have a hybrid model. That's when I my mindset. So
And that became a tremendous challenge in those first sort of 2 years in particular of the pandemic. Was folks who had been historically office bound, you built that camaraderie, right? The days you would either show up at 4 a.m. to do a deployment, or you were staying late on a Thursday night to get a deployment out. And sometimes these could go midnight, 1, 2, 3,
yeah,
they could go all night sometimes when they're super complex. And you're in the trenches together, you're in the office together, you're ordering pizza or Chinese food or whatever it is. And then that endured, I think, for the first part of COVID, because you still had that vestige of in-office camaraderie and shared experience of being in the trenches. And then as folks sort of, there was a tremendous amount of churn across the industry within those, that sort of second year of COVID. And then people were joining companies that never had that in-office experience. They only knew being remote, which becomes this tremendous challenge of, well, if I'm already working remote, and I'm just in an office in my house VPNing into somewhere, doesn't really, you don't have that same level of engagement and camaraderie and corporate culture you build. So I think that's an area where things have settled in, I think, across the globe in our space. But to your point, the body language is so important, and understanding, having people understand that they're not alone in this, right? That throughout the day they've got support across the team, across leadership. It's easy to feel isolated and alone, especially in a world where someone may live in a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio apartment in a big city, and their desk is next to their bed, and all of a sudden that's the only world they know. So yeah, I don't know. It's a long way of saying I hear you, and I agree that that's in person, certainly, with video calls at a minimum help build that back up again. So we're sort of heading into the home stretch here. Can you talk a little bit about, before we hit the quick lightning round, which is something I did not prepare you for, what what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen sort of in your 18 years, whether it's client side, internal, not Fulcrum specific, but that you've seen in the industries, in the tech space?
so for personally, like, if you ask, keeping up with the technology that's evolving and emerging, right?
Yeah.
Keeping up to the speed is one of the biggest challenge, right? So, right. So that's one of my biggest challenge that I'm still facing, right? So now, like, when you feel that, yeah, okay, you know enough about how things need to be delivered using this, there are few technologies emerges that where you need to keep yourself updated, right? And that's been there from beginning of my career. So
All right. So we're going to head into the lightning round of questions, which are just arbitrary questions that I'm curious about personally. Do you have a favorite style of music and/or musical act or artist?
yeah, always I have one of my favorite in India. You have Ilayaraja. He's known for melody,
Okay.
right? So I like the melody music.
That was not one of the ones that I had to get on stage and dance
You
Bollywood to.
still you still can, but like the movement would be a little slow and mellowed down. That's all.
Favorite movie?
Favorite genre or a favorite movie?
Let's go genre first, and then if I know that can change day to day, but favorite genre.
Yeah, favorite genre always I like action packed,
Okay.
right?
I was
And
worried you were going to say horror movies, which is
no,
terrifies me.
yeah, and the favorite movie I do not know. I think I have handful, so probably I always like Tom Cruise. So
I'm sorry.
movies.
Oh, Tom
Tom,
Cruise.
yeah. So
Yeah, I mean he's. I mean, I remember reading a few articles about. There's one funny one about Matt Damon, who's also in a lot of action and intrigue movies. I think the article calculated how much money has been sent trying to bring Matt Damon home in movies, whether it's Saving Private Ryan or The Martian or
Mhm.
the Green Zone. Apparently, it was like $3 trillion in theory that was spent bringing Matt Damon home. But yeah, those action movies are good. And then you are desert island, and there's one meal that you have to eat forever. It's there magically for some reason. What is the go-to meal that you could survive on forever?
So in a desert, that's a thing. So I have to think a lot. So I have never been into this situation. So, but uh,
Well, and
the-
hopefully you never are.
yeah,
But if
probably
you
my
are,
instinct will
food
say,
everywhere
given the
magically.
moment, right? Probably, right? So if it's
I'm
on a
sorry.
normal land, I would say water, but in desert, you cannot say that. So,
Well, water could be part of the meal. Is there a favorite food?
oh, favorite food in general, like I I'm a foodie. I try everything, so I love cooking. So there is nothing specific I can say, right? So I try
Spoken
to
like a true
enjoy
foodie.
the flavor of each different cuisines and different foods. So my favorite still would be my mom's goat curry. Nothing beats that.
So I respect that answer for two big reasons. One, as
Yeah,
a true foodie, you said you couldn't commit to one food,
yeah.
and two, you gave your mom a shout out for her dish. So I mean, there's no better son in the world than doing that publicly on a vidcast, calling out your mom. Um, Gousi, really appreciate you joining us here for Tipping Point. Um, Everyone who's joined us along the way, thanks so much. As always, we will be back next Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So please continue to join us and let us know how we're doing. Thanks so much, Gosi.
Thank you. Thanks,
Good
Andrew.
rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.